Welcome to the show. Willie, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Willie Schaefer. I'm the Adobe specialist here at UTSA. And beyond that, I have been a designer using Adobe tools for, I hate to admit it, 25 years now. I've worked in education for about 20 years. I've done just about everything in education and design. I've been an instructor myself. I've been an instructional designer. I've been this Adobe specialist. I've been a marketer. I've done everything in design from working for DJs and doing flyers to working for country western bands. A big part of my experience has been doing music stuff, but I've also done books, posters, videos, you name it with design, and I've probably done it.
Fantastic. And in all that experience, you've probably seen nothing like this AI revolution we're undergoing now. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between AI and personal branding?
Sure. So to me, this AI has, I have a lot of friends who are designers who are afraid of it. But I look at it like having a personal assistant. So many times when I'm designing, it feels like me against the world, right? It is me by myself at my computer, pushing myself as hard as I can with a client saying, I needed that yesterday. And with AI, it allows me to kind of come up with some ideas and build out concepts that I might not have had time to do previously because I wouldn't have had time to do the sketches or come up with things. As an artist, that's another thing that I like to do. I like to use AI to create photos. So instead of me going out and taking a photo of something, I use the AI for it. As far as personal branding, a lot of it, I think, comes in the concept stage. So as you're building content out and thinking about it, that's to me where AI really comes in, is that you can take your idea, really quickly build a concept of it, and then go in and develop it for real.
Can you take us through that kind of process? Where do you go first? Is the inspiration the first step, or is there something else there?
It really depends on the client. If it's something for myself, it's just sit down and start working. If it's just me and I'm like, ooh, I get to make a piece for me now, or, if I'm building a content to promote myself, I just go and I get into the program and I start rolling. Now, I always tell people that's kind of the worst thing you can do. I think this is just partially too because of the years that I've been doing this that I can do that. But what I think is, if I'm working with a client, it's a very different story because I'm going to the client, I'm talking to them about what they want. I'm usually coming up with whatever we determine. Sometimes the client, depending on how much they want to pay me, will say, we want 10 sketches, we want 20 sketches, we want 50 sketches, and honestly, lately, some of the clients that I've been having, I've been using AI to help me with those sketches to develop them for the client, then moving from that to actually developing the content. So it really ends up depending on who I'm working for and what I'm working on. Sometimes I'll work for a client that's just like, roll with it. It's your vision, especially with musicians and stuff, they're a little bit more chill. But the last client I was working for was a nonprofit and they wanted a very specific vision and they wanted me to go through, and I iterated many times with them to the point where I had to say, okay, you guys are about to start paying me more because the iterations are getting a little bit too much right.
So you're able to take those skills from working with clients and apply them to your own personal brand. What is the process for your own personal brand whenever you're incorporating design thinking? Like, how do you apply this design thinking expertise that you have to your own personal brand, as you may or may not use AI to build out that personal brand online?
So I think a big chunk of it is empathy. Now, that's one of those key points in design thinking, right? And who am I branding to? Who am I branding for? Am I selling my own personal brand? Then if I'm selling my own personal brand, who do I want to consume whatever I'm producing, right? Like, who is that audience? And I want to think and feel from their point of view. I want to start thinking about what it is. Now, if it's something where I know I'm marketing myself for my music that I like, right? I'm going to put myself in the shoes of the music consumer. If I'm marketing my art, I'm going to put myself in the shoes of the art consumer. If I'm marketing myself as a graphic designer, I'm thinking way more corporate, right? And thinking more about that user. Because I think one of the biggest failures that young designers make is only thinking about what they want. This looks really cool. And it's not always this looks really cool. Yes, it should look neat. It should look interesting. I always say that a design should be what I call fridge cool. Cool enough where if you put it on something that somebody would say, I would put that on my refrigerator and hang it up as a design on my refrigerator. Because we've all done stuff like that, And I really feel like if you think about that person, you empathize with that person, you can still make it cool and still make it interesting, but you take it out of yourself and making it just about you.
What do you think are some of the misconceptions in the design design process?
Well, that's a big one, going back to not thinking about the client, not thinking about who's consuming this. One of my favorite stories to tell is my background is a studio background. I started off doing studio art into design. And one of my good friends was doing ceramic pots, and brilliant making these pots. Beautiful, all these wonderful colors. And he would get these like big bursts of color and things like this in his pot. And I go up to him and he looked kind of miserable. He's doing a bunch of pots. He's doing some glazing. I said, "Clint, what's wrong, man?" He's like, what's up? What you doing? He's like, "Making blue pots." Okay, why are you making blue pots if you feel miserable doing this? He's like, "Because I know they'll sell. I know that if I take these and I go to a market, my blue pots sell like that because that's what people want. They don't want my bright, colorful stuff." And this is something that you have to separate out. And this is why I do art too, is because my design a lot of times is a blue pot. And I think this is what a lot of designers don't realize at first, is that this is something else. Again, I've taught designers for years, and I've had people tell me, "You cannot critique this. This is my art. This is my passion. I'm so passionate about my work. Why? How could you say this about my passion?" No, design is design. Art is art. If you want to make art, go make art. That's great. I love art. But if you're making design, you have to think about that client first. So I think that's one of those really big keys to think about. The other thing to think about is going back to what I was saying earlier about iterations. One of the things I always would tell my designers is your first idea is your worst idea, because people want to come in and they go, "Oh, I know this. I'm going to start making it. I'm doing something about a dog washing place and it's going to be a dog in a bubble." How obvious is that, right? Like, that's a really obvious answer. Sit down, sketch it out, think about it. And even if you're not brilliant at drawing, that's again where the AI can come in, and you can start coming up with some prompts and some ideas and really help yourself get past that initial concept.
I wonder, for those students who are not necessarily designers, you probably have some advice for them from this world of design that you're speaking of. I think that advice to think about the client and the audience is absolutely applicable to anyone who isn't necessarily a design specialist or an Adobe specialist like you are. What other things do you have for those folks who are trying to build a personal brand, but maybe need some of that expertise from the design process or design thinking? What are those lessons that might apply best to them?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that brings me right back to that dog in a bubble, because I feel like a lot of people design in a bubble. They don't think about what's going on around them. They don't look at what's going on around them. They don't consume design. And this another story. When I was in college, I was dating this girl and we were at Burger King of all places. And I'm sitting there and I'm critiquing the design of the Burger King menu that's up on the wall. And she's like, "Willie, turn it off. Not right now." But that's what you have to be. If you really want to get better at design, even if you're a non-designer, consume design. Look at what's going around you. Look at what you like. Look at what's failing and what's successful. Again, if you're thinking about a client, look at what they've already done in the past, right? Look at their website. Take a look at any marketing materials you can find to them. If you're working on your personal brand, look at others. One resource that I think a lot of people don't utilize is Behance from Adobe. It's Adobe's social media platform, and people post up all their content that they build on there. And it's a really great way to go on and learn more about what others are doing. Don't be that dog in the bubble. Get outside of that bubble and to help yourself see what others are doing. One other thing, and this is something that I see all the time, and this is just something that I always tell younger designers and non-designers to be aware of, is sports teams. Not so much their marketing, but their colors, because I feel like a lot of young designers fall into the trap of sports team colors. And when I would teach intro design, I'd see a lot of blue and orange stuff and blue and orange stuff. And this is not even at UTSA. So it's not like it's like that UTSA influence. People just see those, those two colors that work really well together. And they're like, "Oh, I should go with it." And then you look at that design and you instantly think New York Knicks, because it would be like that kind of orange and blue. So be wary of your colors and your color choice, that it's not, like you're using Coca-Cola Red or Barbie Pink or something like that, and it's not instantly tied to another brand.
That's good. Being aware of color choice is something that maybe non-designers would need to hear, right? What about the other pieces as they put together work to produce? Because, for example, I know that our students who are working on a personal brand will need to create images and video for different platforms. Can you get into the details of what to think about as you're creating that post? Obviously, we're thinking about the audience. We want to think about our personal branding objectives. Do we want to speak to more an employer or more to clients? But what about the design part of that post? What are those things that are the checklist in your mind?
So the design part of it, it really, again, it's that empathy. Who am I making it for? And that is really where I start. Now, one of the key factors for empathy, if you're thinking about it, is a human character. I almost said a female character, but I do use females a lot more often than I use males in design. And the reason that is because women can relate to females and men like to look at females, to be brutally honest. So a lot of times I will use a human character in my pieces. And a lot of times when I use a human character, I do use a female just because I find that it appeals to more people. The other thing is who's looking at it. The fact that we need to think about diversity in the characters that we put into the piece, that we're not putting the same looking character. And this could be race, gender, style, even age. This is something that I feel a lot of people miss out on, is that they accidentally age discriminate in their pieces. So be thoughtful of that. The other thing about designing pieces, whether it be video, print, whatever, typography. There's so much bad typography out there. One of the things that I always say is, going back to what I was saying earlier, is look at what people are doing. Be careful. Think about where the application of this piece is. One of my favorite examples that I used to use, and I wish I still had the bottle, it's been lost to time, but it was a bottle of water that I bought from the store. And if you look at it up close, like if you hold the bottle up close to your face, it looks fine. It was called spring water. But that same bottle of water on the shelf, if you're walking by it, because the way the characters were, how tight they were, it looked like it said boring water. And so you need to think, if you're developing content for the screen, are you viewing it on your phone? Are your users looking at it on a computer screen? Are they watching it on TV screen for YouTube, something like that? A lot of people don't take those things into consideration. For example, if you've ever watched a YouTube video and it has type on it and the type is too close to the edge of the screen and it gets cut off, that's because they weren't taking into consideration that a television is going to have a little bit of a dead space at the edge that it tries to cover up, as opposed to a computer where usually that screen goes right up to the edge. So you need to give a little bit more breathing room for that type in a video. So also, one last thing with video and type, thinking about how long your type is on screen. Because if it's a situation where you have a huge dense piece of type on screen and no one can read it, then that's not really effective, right? You actually have to take time. And what I always would tell my students when I was having them produce video, is to read it like this. If you have video, then it needs to be read slowly. You can't read it like you would normally read, like if you're reading a book or whatever.
So slowing down is important. Is that for articulation and pronunciation? Is that what we're looking for, clarity there, or why?
Well, so that's more for type. So the idea of legibility of type. I almost said readability, but readability is more of the level of complexity of the type. But legibility of the type, because if you have 4 words on a screen and you have 1 second to read 4 words, some people can read that quickly, but then there are people who might not be able to read as fast, and then you're instantly saying, this isn't for you. Now, there is that kind of thing of being said, of being kind of subliminal and popping things up quickly, but if it's something that needs to be read or needs to be seen, you might want to linger on it for a moment. Now, with that, with speaking, yes, I think enunciation is incredibly important. You know, you folks listening to me right now might not realize, but this is not my actual real voice. I grew up in Tennessee and I have a bit of an accent. You know, it's one of those things where you get around my friends back home and this is what I start talking like. But I know when I'm on video, I want to make sure I'm enunciating. And again, there's nothing wrong with an accent. There's nothing bad with an accent, but I have a voice that I use when I'm talking here as opposed to when I'm talking to my friends. And you'll probably find that voice too if you're doing a lot of voiceover work for video.
I love that you mentioned this voice thing, because I know that students and anyone struggling to create a personal brand have to embrace authenticity while at the same time making sure that they have a public persona. And so that public persona must ring true with their personal identity. Can you talk a little bit about that tension and what went into you crafting your teaching personal brand, or your I want to work for UTSA as an Adobe specialist personal brand? What are some of the things that went into crafting an identity for online consumption while at the same time making sure it's authentic to you?
This is something I tell people all the time, is no matter what you choose to do in life, you have to wear a mask. You will have to wear a mask. There is no job in this world where you get to be you. You at home is different than whatever you choose to do. I have a friend who is a world travel DJ. He travels all over the place and DJs and does graphic design, and that's his entire life, and I'm jealous of that. but I talk to him in a regular conversation. It's a million times different than the persona that he puts up on stage. But with that, it got me thinking about who that is, right? Like, who is my work persona and what is his persona? And this brings me to strangely professional wrestling. One of the things, I was doing some research on professional wrestling characters and how they develop the characters. One of those weird kind of rabbit holes you go down. And what they always say is the best professional wrestling character is your own personality turned up to 11. And I love that. This personality that you see right now, this is me. I love education. I love design. I love talking about it, but I just turn it up when I'm doing something like this. When I'm done, I'll be quiet. I'll be a little bit more chill, be a little bit more calm. But when I'm talking about this, I want to bring excitement. Biggest things, and I help people with video all the time. One of the biggest things that I see is people are themselves at 7 when they come on video. And they're like, hey guys, today we're going to talk about, and you've seen this on YouTube. You've gone to a YouTube channel and you've instantly turned it off. I guarantee everyone watching this has done this at least once. YouTube, TikTok, whatever it may be, is they've gone to a channel and they have someone who's talking about the thing they're interested in, but they bring this kind of energy and it's very boring and it's very, like, don't bring that energy. And this goes for whatever you're working on. This can go for print as well. You know, it could be a situation where, yeah, you're feeling like a 6 that day, but you got to turn it up. You got to put it together. You got to make it happen. Be that 11, even if it's just for an hour, because this is going to help you with everything in life. No matter what you choose to do, there's going to be a couple of things that you have to do. You have to interview whatever job you have, and even if you're running a business yourself, you still have to interview because you're working with a client and you're trying to get that position, right? So you have to be yourself at 11 for that. You're going to have to do presentations for whatever you do. You're going to have to be yourself at 11 for that. And you really need to be able to be that person. Honestly, to me, one of the easiest ways to practice that is by making videos, by producing content, because I will tell you, my video production, the time that I've put into that has made me so much of a better presenter than I used to be.
That's great. It helps us to focus now on the video side of personal branding. And you've already covered a lot of really good tips and tricks and things to keep in mind for crafting our online personal brand on platforms like YouTube, IG Reels, or TikTok, right? What are some other things that we need to keep in mind on the video side? And I know that a thumbnail isn't a part of the video, but it kind of is. So can we speak a little bit more about what we need to have in mind for video platforms specifically as we bring our design thinking to our personal brands?
So yeah, you're right. Thumbnail is a key. And we see this with, if you flip through YouTube a lot. I watch a ton of YouTube, and there's channels where you can tell they don't make the thumbnail for it, and it's not as aesthetically pleasing, right? You want to have something that people want to click on. Going back to what I was saying earlier about having people in pieces. When I produce a lot of training content for YouTube, it's screen shares. It's not me, it's just a screen share. So in my thumbnails, I always be sure to put a picture of me so someone could put a face to the voice to help them connect the dots. You know, one of the things in basic film theory is if you are showing a location, you want to have that establishing shot. Example, your scene takes place in a cafe in Paris. You're not going to go to Paris to shoot this. If it's a Hollywood film, they're not going to go to Paris to shoot it. Most likely, they're going to go to a soundstage and it's going to have a cafe, right? But they're going to use some stock footage of Paris to show, oh, in your brain, I see that this is Paris and these people are in Paris. You don't think of it as a soundstage, and it's really helpful. And this is something that thumbnails do. They establish, before you even get into it, you get a character, a personality, or what kind of feeling this video is going to have. So it's really important that you do that and you think about that. The other thing that I think is really important with video is rhythm and timing, because I see it go two different ways and I see two different problems. I see videos that are too slow and they just go on and on and on. And I see videos that are too quick and they boom, 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 and you get nothing out of them. Now, I know that's kind of Reels, TikTok kind of style right now, is like go, 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 go. But I think you got to balance that with, you know, I look at things like those shorter videos or even YouTube shorts as like a treat, a snack, one of those fun size candy bars that you get in Halloween. They're great, but they don't fill you up. You don't get that full feeling from the content, whereas YouTube to me gives me that full meal feeling from the content. And I think that's one of those really important things with personal branding is that yes, you can have those snack size, this is a delicious little snack of my brand, but then there's also needs to be that content behind it. And this is another key thing. It doesn't matter if it's video, print, blog, website, whatever, skywriting. It needs to have some sort of content that keeps people coming back. And if it's the same thing all the time or the content isn't interesting, people will not come.
And as you craft, you're both an employee of the University of Texas at San Antonio as the Adobe specialist, and you work with clients. Can you speak a little bit about what kinds of things are cross-applied to both people who are crafting a personal brand so that they can get a job, are crafting a personal brand so that they can attract clients to work with clients?
With that, I think that it's a matter of finding what is common between those two, strengthening that area. So if you know that no matter what you do, you want to work in blah field, right? Then you need to strengthen whatever components it is to work in blah field. For me, education, I know I want to work in. And even though I'm working with clients, a lot of those times those clients I can think of them as educational. I know this sounds weird because you could be like, oh, well, how is a DJ educational? Well, it's not necessarily educational. But what I'm doing is I'm educating people about this event, right? I'm telling them about it. I'm getting them aware of it. And so I'm using a lot of those same skills and abilities to get them talking about it. Now, I think that a big thing to think about, again, and I keep going back to this, but it's really true, is who it's for, using that empathy again, because that is going to determine color schemes, that is going to determine font choices, that is going to determine imaging, any kind of marketing you're going to do. Now, that being said, when you're doing things, and this is my highest recommendation, when you're doing things for that day job, if you're still trying to get those clients on the side, that you're building that portfolio from that day job as well. One of the things that I say definitely crosses between the side hustle and between the daily life is I'm always building experience, contacts, and portfolio. And if you can build those three things, that is really key for you in finding work. People always ask me, well, how do you get freelance clients? And I'm like, because I talk to people. My job is to talk to people here at UTSA, but I talk to anyone who will listen to me. I talk to people I go to events and I talk to people. I talk to people online. LinkedIn, if you're not rocking LinkedIn right now, you need to get on that. I post on that way more than any other social media that I use. And is it as fun as other social media? No. It's not, but other social media, well, I mean, all social media can make you money, but it is the one social media that I feel is one of the strongest for your personal brand that a lot of people miss out on.
And I'm so glad that you transitioned from what we were talking about before to LinkedIn, because I did want to ask you about LinkedIn and personal branding. Let's talk about LinkedIn and what people need to know as they craft their personal brand on LinkedIn.
It is imperative to set yourself a schedule for LinkedIn. And there are tools that schedule out different social media posts, but if you don't want to use those, and honestly, it's good practice to just say, okay, I'm going to post to LinkedIn these days or these times, and start to make sure that you're thinking about different kinds of content. So for my LinkedIn, just to give you an example, every Monday and Wednesday, a new video goes up. That's during the semester. During the summer, I take time off from doing videos, but during the semester, every Monday and Wednesday, a new video goes up. Beyond that, I'm reading, for me, because I'm talking about Adobe stuff, I look at the Adobe blog. I repost and reshare things from the Adobe blog. I'm on the Adobe Express Discord server. So anytime there's a new feature that's brought up on the Discord server that may not even have any kind of announcement, I will go on LinkedIn and start posting about that. Because a lot of people on LinkedIn, and I say this as an old person, are older, and they're probably not out in the Discord servers and really on the bleeding edge of things. And whatever field you're in, there is probably a Discord server for it. There's a Reddit for it. There's something that people who might be in higher positions, who are a little bit older, aren't checking out. Check those things out. Get that content, bring it to LinkedIn, and you are a pioneer. You're showing it and talking about it before other people are. The other thing I do is I follow other people who are doing that. The Photoshop channel, for example. The Photoshop channel, the guy who runs that is phenomenal. Like I love Photoshop. I can't I can't keep up with him. He's so good. And so I follow him on LinkedIn, and I'll reshare a lot of his content. I reshare a lot of things on LinkedIn as well, though, that other people might want to consume. I like to reshare jobs because I know a lot of students looked at my LinkedIn and they might be interested in looking for work. So I share that as well. And when people see that, they start sharing your content as well. And that's really what we're aiming for, right? We're trying to get people to look at our content. Analytics are king. And this is, again, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever social medias. Look at your analytics. Now, with the basic free LinkedIn, you don't get all the details, but it will tell you a lot of times how many views you have, roughly who's looking at your content, and start taking note of that. You say, okay, for me, when I look at it, doesn't tell me who's looked at my content, but it says, oh, somebody from Adobe has looked at your content. So what am I going to do? I'm going to start putting more stuff and making sure that I'm putting in keywords like Adobe. I'm going to be putting in keywords like Photoshop. I'm going to be putting in keywords like education, because I know a lot of educators look at my profile. So I'm going to start thinking about those keywords that help the algorithm along to enhance my brand without me really working for it. I'm just posting and the algorithm does the rest.
I know that a lot of those analytics have probably given you insights into what does well. Can you think about some of your most successful posts and what set them apart from other posts? Like, what was it that was magical about that post that made it get more interactions or engagements or views or whatever the metrics told you were positive?
There's a couple of things. One is that cutting edge stuff. Again, being ahead of the curve and being the only one who's posting about it does sometimes get it. Things that are trendy at the moment, if you're talking about, for example, when all the Photoshop stuff was going on with the royal family and I'm talking about Photoshopping, that's going to get more interest because people are talking about it already in the news. The other thing, positivity. People love positivity on LinkedIn. So if you're giving affirmations, you're talking about, keep up the good work as you're going through this, but then tying it to some concept that you're talking about as well. I get a lot from that. Sometimes things will miss. Sometimes you're like, man, this is going to be great. Like everybody's talking about AI right now. And I found this image is really funny looking because the AI in it's bad. And I want to share that. And I'm like, this is going to blow up. Everybody's going to be talking. This is going to be a great post. And I look at my analytics and I'm like, that didn't work at all. I don't know what's wrong with this, but it just absolutely bombed. You're going to have those moments. Don't let those moments discourage you. Also, the thing you have to remember too, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever, more than likely, you're not going to have Mr. Beast numbers. You have to have realistic goals when you're starting off. And what you need to look for is not giant numbers, but that everything is trending upward. And if something starts trending downward, think about why it's trending downward. What's not working? What do you need to change? Is it something with the content, the time of the year, the phase of the moon? What about the content made it trend down for that time?
So bleeding edge performs well with your audience. And thank you for taking us through what doesn't work, because that would have been my next question. I appreciate you taking us through that, because I think that's just as important to understand that, again, unless you have a large following already, those interactions won't be as high. What else makes it work though? What else have you seen? Because you've posted on LinkedIn a lot more than most people watching. What worked? How did it work? Can you break down the anatomy of that post with a little bit more detail?
So we want to think about what we're writing, right? And we want to take a look and think about, as I mentioned earlier, those keywords that people are looking for, that the algorithm is going to look for. So if I'm going in, and this is, I think, common mistake I see on LinkedIn when I see people post. I'm going to use Adobe, for example, just because that's what most of the posts I consume are about. So I'm looking at a colleague who's at another institution who's in my role, and she posts something up about, we had a great Adobe training today, and it's a photo of the Adobe training. Then I know that the interaction on that is not going to be as high as it could be. And the reasoning why is we had a great training session with Adobe. Okay, that's fine. But we had a great training session with Adobe. We covered A, B, C. We're using those tool names. We covered AI and Adobe Photoshop, and we looked at Firefly Model 3, and we're using some of those things, and we're getting into a little bit more detail. The other thing you can do, again, going back to the emotion of it, is build a story out of it. I had a great training today in Adobe Photoshop. Joe Smith came to us and he had never used it before. And by the time he came out, he was building brilliant images of giant robots. I don't know, whatever it is that helps people connect to that. And so I think emotion is a big thing. Now, I know also with the longer ones, there's also this trend on LinkedIn of giving the kind of clickbaity bit, and then LinkedIn will expand down. It doesn't show you all the content, and then giving the meat of the content under that. And I know that does move the needle. I try to stay away from that kind of clickbait stuff. But it really does. It does. If you're trying to get some numbers, it will pop your numbers up. But I wouldn't do all your content like that. The other thing too that I see as a kind of a, not necessarily a problem, but it can be a problem on LinkedIn, is sometimes if I'm sharing links on LinkedIn, it doesn't give a preview of that link. So what I recommend you do, if you ever run into this problem, you put in a link and it's not giving a preview of it, people aren't going to click on that because it's just a little blurb and some blue type. If it does that, take the link off, delete the link out, go and create a quick, I go into Express a lot of times, make an AI image, put some type over it through Express, drop that graphic in, then bring that link back in, because that will give a visual. Visuals help tremendously with LinkedIn posts because we are visual people. As we're scrolling through, we see a cool image, you're going to stop on it, right? So if you take that, you build that visual out, put the link back in, it'll work. Now, with that, the reason I say delete the link out, come back is not every time, but sometimes if I try to put an image in after a link, LinkedIn doesn't want to do it. So if you take the link out, put the image in, put the link back in, it will work. I don't know. It's one of those weird things, but if you ever run into that problem, that's how you solve it. But I guess, the long and short of it is that you have written content that relates to something, slightly, some sort of emotional response to it, visual. And those, I think, are keys. Now, one last little note about something that can go wrong in LinkedIn, and this is something that I've seen professionals mess up, is that you can embed your video into LinkedIn, right? It doesn't have to be a link to a YouTube video. That's fine. But I find that to make it look really well, you have to go into your settings when you're exporting your video and make sure that it's not as compressed. The more compressed the video is going into LinkedIn, it starts to get blocky and chunky and pixelated. And I'm not sure what it is about LinkedIn that does it, because it doesn't do it on other platforms, but LinkedIn sometimes will crush your video.
That's really good advice for LinkedIn. And there were a lot of things there. I did want to push back on one part. It's not clickbait if it's a compelling headline, right? There's a difference. And it's not clickbait if it pays off for the reader, right? So if we have a compelling headline, which might be called clickbait, right? Then if we're paying off the reader when they click see more, then that's not the same. We want people to do that because that will help people to be seen and to help elevate their personal brand. And if they
For sure.
other things you're talking about, like making sure that the compression is right in their Adobe program. You use Adobe Premiere Pro, I assume, for that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in there, there's an option that typically is selected. I think it's like variable high bit rate. If you turn that off and you turn it to the actual high quality settings, that tends to come out better.
That's excellent. Do you have other tips like that of combining Adobe tools and AI? Because you mentioned using an AI image and then taking it and putting it into an Adobe Express and crafting your actual image to help hook people visually, not just with the text. Can you talk about other relationships that you use with AI, what the tools in AI are and what the tools in Adobe are, and how do you mishmash those things?
So, man, that's a big question, but there's a lot of ways I've been using AI for everything I do right now. So let's start, because we were talking about LinkedIn with LinkedIn. Like I said, if I need a visual with it, I will go in. I was running a series of training sessions. I wanted an image in a hurry. I go in to Adobe Express, type in the image that I'm looking for. Boom, I have the start of my graphic. Now, one of the things that a lot of people miss in Express is that you can do an entire layout with AI inside of there. So if you don't want to just produce an image, you can go in and produce a whole social media post through AI. It makes the graphics, it makes the type and everything, and you just have to change out the content of it. It's really, really easy. So I leverage those a lot. I use Firefly when I want to make something pretty. So if I need a pretty visual to go along with a LinkedIn post, I feel like what I get out of Firefly is a little bit more pretty if it's just a visual by itself. No type, no graphics or anything. I'll use Firefly by itself. As a Photoshop person, I'm using a lot of Photoshop for this example it's the dumbest thing, but it's like a true real example. Let's say you are working on something, they want a professional headshot. You don't have time to go out, like I was telling somebody this. I was like, I haven't worn a suit and tie since I interviewed for this job 4 years ago. It's just not who I am. And so let's say I need to go and have a professional headshot for a conference. Well, I don't even have, the pandemic's hit, I've put on weight, my suit and tie don't fit anymore. So I can go into Photoshop, take a headshot of myself here in this office, do a selection on it, do a generative fill, put a suit and tie on myself, take out my background in the background of like an office space, and boom, I have a professional headshot in about 5 minutes. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to pay anyone. And I guess that's one of the great things about AI is it does save you a lot of money. So that's one way I'm leveraging it. Video has been a game changer. I cannot express how fast my video production has gotten, because in Premiere Pro, you can go in now and generate out the transcript of what you're saying and then edit the video based on that transcript. So if I stumble over my words, I can select that, push the backspace key, and it's like I never made that mistake. It's all AI. So I've been using that a lot. I've also been using Remix tool in Premiere Pro, which is one of the first AI tools that they really added in. It was really under the radar, but it allows you to take your stock audio and say your video is 5 minutes long. The stock audio track that you found that you love is 3 minutes long. You can go in, select it, drag it out. It remixes it for you to fit into that time space. And that's something that used to take me hours and hours and hours of work. So I leverage that quite often. As far as other tools, I use ChatGPT a lot. This is just for rewriting emails, writing content, making sure that things are well written and concise. You might not tell from me talking here, but sometimes I ramble on about things. And so sometimes I'll take a rambling email and put it in there, and it makes it more concise, and it makes it something, that is just easier to consume. When you're tired, this is something else that you can do. Like I always tell people, be sure if you're working with a client to reply to them the next day, hey, thank you for meeting with me. Yesterday it was great. I like to do that first thing in the morning. So when they come into their email, they see that. First thing in the morning, I haven't had my coffee yet. I'm like, oh, I don't even know who I am. So I will take and write that email out in a Word doc, throw it in a ChatGPT, tell it to clean it up. Then I take it back into the Word doc, clean it up a little bit more, and then drop it into the email and send it off to the client. I've been leveraging that quite a bit. I'm trying to think of other tools that I've been really using as far as AI goes. Those I think are the primary ones, but there's so many new tools coming out every single day. I know that I've seen some really great things for audio, and I can't wait to start using some of those audio tools for my video projects. I haven't gotten into that yet. I've seen that demo for Sora for video, for stock video. Man, I'm excited about that. So I think there's going to be, within the next year, there's going to be tools that we haven't even imagined yet that we'll be able to leverage. And this is something that is going to be on all of you watching this today, is to keep up with those tools and leverage them, because it's what I told somebody the other day. If you're not keeping up, you're getting run over.
And where do you go to keep up? Because we know that these models will be released maybe by the time people watch or listen to this episode. They might already have access to Sora. They might already have access to the new Google Workplace tools that are coming out with AI Gemini embedded. So where do you go to find information to stay up to date with these AI breakthroughs?
Well, this is another great thing about LinkedIn, because the people that I follow on LinkedIn, people I friend on LinkedIn, are people who are talking about this as well. So that's another great thing you can do, is if you go and you find these people who are talking about it, like if you're looking at like tech blogs or things like that, those people are on LinkedIn. Go find those people, and then that way you're not searching for it. You go to your feed instead of like seeing pictures of puppies and cats or whatever you typically scroll through on socials. You're seeing all this bleeding edge technology, and that's how I keep up with it. And I will say, building that list out was pretty challenging at first. It takes a minute, but now a lot of times I do that. Now, the other thing, Discord servers. I love leveraging Discord. It's one of those things that I had a minute where I was an old man about it. I'm like, I don't get this. I don't understand why people are using the Discord. This is weird. And then I started realizing, wow, this is a really great way to share information. A lot of times companies will have their own Discords that have engineers from the company in the Discord server talking about stuff. Sometimes you get to give feedback. Sometimes by being in those, you get to be in exclusive betas and things like that. So always keep your eyes open for that. YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube, and there's a lot of great tech channels out there that cover old tech, new tech trends and things like that. And I recommend going out and doing some research on that and finding the channel you like. I'm hesitant to recommend any one channel because there's so much content out there that you're going to find the tech person that speaks to you. And that's what I recommend, but you got to keep up. The other thing I recommend with that is setting time in your schedule each week for it. Doesn't have to be long, 30 minutes, an hour out of your schedule. Just say, I'm keeping up with tech for this long.
What's your first, second, and third favorite social media channels, and what applies to all of them? We know number one is LinkedIn because you're there all the time and
right.
You're talking about how useful that is. But what are the other ones that you post on for your personal brand? And what applies to LinkedIn the same way it applies to those other ones?
This is hard because, yes, I am, for my personal brand, I know my audience, going back to that empathy. And I know my audience is a little bit older. So for me, it's LinkedIn, YouTube, and then Twitter or X, just because I know that's where most of my people live. Now, if you are marketing toward a younger audience, working with a younger audience, obviously, depending on what happens with TikTok, we'll see what happens, Instagram, those kind of things. But for me, those are my top three. And this is something that I think is imperative for people to understand. It's not what you like. It's not, I really like Instagram, so I'm going to brand myself on Instagram. I go back to what I was saying way earlier about I've done marketing for country western bands before, which was like way out of my depth of knowledge. But I did my research and I found out through analytics and data that most of the people coming to the shows that I were promoting were in their 70s and 80s. This is like old-timey country. So I was on Facebook like a fiend. And I know like most people watching this probably like, well, that's my, what my grandma uses or what my aunt uses or whatever. I still use Facebook. But anyway, I know a lot of people have that kind of feeling about it. But that's where my market lived, right? And that's where my marketing dollars were effective. When I was doing actually posts that I was boosting and things like that, I got way more out of those through doing them on Facebook. So depending on where the people live who consume your brand is where you will spend your time. So whatever might be my top three is definitely not going to be your top three, is definitely not going to be your friend's top three. Just depends on your field, who you're marketing toward. If it's youth, then yeah, you will be on those youthful ones. But if it's an older audience, you need to skew that age up a little bit.
Absolutely. And the things that we learn from each platform culture are going to be different. Like you were mentioning, the things that you might learn on one platform can sometimes not be anywhere found on another platform. So being a part of these different platforms and consuming content on the platforms does help us to inform our own choices when crafting our personal brands for different platforms, right? We've talked about social media. Tell me about websites, because I know you're also an expert in website design. And I know most people have heard about, making sure that you have the F, right? Because the eye scans in the shape of an F. What are some other website recommendations that you recommend? And I know that a lot of people who are Adobe fans love to use Adobe Portfolio. So could you also talk about how to achieve these kinds of goals of personal branding using Adobe?
Yes, the key for web, pure and simple, is always evolve. Always create new content. Always have something for the user to come back to. Have something where anytime someone goes to it, there is a new story, new images, new something. When I was doing country western shows, I was working for a theater and that's what they promoted. And one of the things that I did was post show photos. So if someone came to the show, they could come and be like, oh, there I am. Or, oh, hey, there was that moment that they did that song that I really like. So that there's always something new for them to come back and consume. Now, getting started, that's pretty tricky, right? To think about what you're going to be posting and what you're going to be doing and how you're going to be sharing that. But this honestly ties back into what I was saying about LinkedIn earlier. So if you're posting kind of blog style content, then you can go onto LinkedIn. Hey, check out my new blog on my website. And then you're driving track kind of back and forth, right? So think about the idea of going in, creating new content, making sure that it's visually stimulating and that it's intellectually stimulating as well. Think about where that content is being consumed. Again, this is something that I can't highlight enough. If you're thinking about people looking at it on a screen, it's going to be different than people looking at it on a phone. Now, going back to Adobe Portfolio, that's one of the things and one of the features that I absolutely love about Portfolio. Back in the day when I was doing web design, I would always have to go and program out the website to make sure that it was changing based on whatever device was looking at it. Portfolio does that all automatically for you, so it just makes your life a lot easier. I think also with Portfolio, one of the key things that a lot of people miss out on is thinking about navigation and how your navigation ranks. So sort of going back to what you're saying about what's your 1, 2, 3, like what are those key points of your navigation that you want people to see first? English language, we read left to right. So whatever is on the left is going to have high importance. But then we also have to think, well, people often look for that home button, which is on the left. So maybe that's number one. And then our main content is after that. The other thing with web, and another thing that Portfolio does really well, is interaction. The ability to feel like when you are on a page that you are not viewing this without someone to reach out to about your questions, concerns, or whatever. There are forms that you can set up inside a Portfolio. So if someone had a question, they can reach out to you. So let's say you're doing your Portfolio page as a portfolio, getting people to hire you, right? Put that contact form on there, and then that way they can email you, reach out to you. You know, you're sending it to different clients and stuff. And I've had situations like this before where I have gone and I've talked to a client and they're like, okay, thank you, we're going another direction, but they have my stuff. And then I've had contact forms where they reach out to me 2 years later and they're like, hey, we got your we still have your portfolio. We're sorry that other project didn't work out, but here's another one and we feel you'd be a good fit for. And I've had that come up where I would never expect it, but just because I had that form, they were able to reach out to me.
I want to hear a client success story. Tell us a story that you might tell a client who is trying to decide whether or not we're a good fit to work with, because I imagine you have a lot of client success stories that would help people who are interested in personal branding beyond the Adobe portfolio knowledge or beyond the Behance knowledge that you have or these other platforms that you're using.
So one of my favorite projects was a very weird project. It was something that I never expected to do in my life, and it was making maps for a textbook. I had never had any experience in map making, but a friend of a friend, another one of those conversation kind of things, reached out to me and said, hey, I'm working on this textbook about slums in Brazil and how the government took them over, and I need maps of like before the government took it over and after. I did some photo corrections and other things for the book, but the maps were something that I was like, I can't do this. Yes, I can. Sure. I need the money right now. And I want to be in a textbook. So I went through, I did them. The client was over the moon happy with how they turned out. The book got published. It was used in classes. Other than that, my name is in this book for creating these maps. And it's all from a situation where I was far outside of my comfort zone. And so I always think about that when I'm talking to clients and they might be saying something like, can you do this? And I'm like, no, my brain is saying no, scream, run, you know? And then I think about that experience and say, sure, yeah, I can do that. And I've had clients too, where I've told that story and I've said, you know, they're like, well, do you think you can do this? And I'm like, well, I've had experiences before where it felt very challenging. I made these maps with no map making experience. I learned how to do it. I'm always happy to get out of my comfort zone, which is a good key word, and create something that I never in a million years imagined I can do, but I can do.
Excellent. I love that story stretched your comfort zone. I need to ask, what are your specialties? Do you have more than one? Whenever a client comes to you, they usually want help with what?
The thing that I do a lot of is poster and flyer design. That was my bread and butter for years. So doing posters for events, flyers for events. So again, that's sort of how I started off with the DJ thing. For years and years and years, I did web design. I don't consider that my specialty anymore. It's something that I do for fun now and then, but it's not something that is my passion anymore because I did it for so many years that I'm just like, I'm kind of good. But right now, I'm very passionate about video. I love doing videos. I love editing videos. I love recording content. Anytime I can do photo correction, I don't get much client call for that because it's gotten so easy to do photo correction now that most clients are like, yeah, I can kind of handle that on my own. But when I can do photo correction, man, I love that. That's like getting paid to do something you're passionate about, right? Like it's like getting paid for fun for me. So, there's a variety of different things that I enjoy doing. So I don't like to say that I have one specialty, but I like to say that I feel like I'm open to just about any kind of thing related to design. And maybe that's my specialty, is that I can do many different things with design.
We have people who are working on their personal brand. We have potential clients listening. Can you talk a little bit about your pricing structure for different projects? What have you charged in the past? And we know that past prices aren't indicative of future prices, but what did you charge and how did those projects look as they align with pricing? Obviously, more work is a higher price. What does that look like? And maybe focus on video editing, because I know that a lot of people need that with the video boom that we've had.
So expert pricing, depending on the client, is between $50 and $100 an hour. And what I do is I never give a flat price. I give an hourly rate. I will give an estimation of hours. And then in my contract, I always write out the clause that if I go over these hours, this is my hourly rate beyond that. Now, as far as choosing between 50 and that depends on what the detail of the project is. If it's a simple illustration, that photo correction, that's $50 an hour. We're getting into heavy video editing, motion graphics. We're looking closer to that $100 an hour. When I was a student, it was $20 to $30 an hour. So that's typically what I was charging. Now, with that, your hours will vary because you are probably learning the tool. You're learning the craft. So do realize that it might take, but if it's because you're still learning to do it, you probably shouldn't charge for it when you're trying to figure something out. You want to be fair to your client and you want to give them a fair price. So if it's because you don't know how to do it and you're slow, take that into consideration.
I was going to say that's the cost of research and development, and the client doesn't pay for that. That's included in the price. Whatever you're an expert level, you're charging for your expertise and being able to get it done, right?
Exactly. And that's a lot of times my hours that I calculate now are pretty low because I know I can do it pretty quickly, but that also puts me at a cheaper rate than a lot of other people out there. So that's how I've gotten some clients is I'm a good price, right? Now, I will say too, as far as rates and hours and things like that and clients, sometimes I take into consideration as well who the client is. Is it going to be an easy client to work for? Those hours are going to go down. If I know it's going to be a challenging client, those hours, I might stack them up a little bit because I know, there's a client I've worked for in the past. They want 20 different versions of the project. And then when it's just done, they want 20 versions of that, and then 20 versions of that. I will put a lot of hours in that. Now, that's something you'll learn with time. Something else that I recommend, this I can't stress enough, make sure you have a contract. Never, ever, ever do it on handshake, word, verbal, whatever. Have it in writing, have it signed. Do not start until something's signed. The other thing that I always recommend when you're starting a design, doesn't matter who it's for, get some of the money up front. I cannot say the number of times I've started designs, bands. I used to do a lot of work for bands. The band would break up. They decided to go and we're not going to make a CD right now. And they wanted me to do an album cover. The company folded. I've had that happen to me before too. So if you're halfway into the project, you have nothing to show for it. If someone doesn't want to show you and give you some money up front for your work, you might want to move on and find another client, because I say get something up front, even if it's just a goodwill bit of cash to say, here's what I need to get started, and then go with it. Be sure that you're covering yourself. You are never, ever designing for experience. That you're not saying, I get this all the time, well, we're a really great client. If you work for us, it's going to give you some experience and some clout. You can put it on your resume and your portfolio. Yeah. No, because money. This is to make money.
Are there services that you've used to advertise to get clients? Are there marketplaces like that you might recommend? And if not, why?
Personally, I don't do it. I, again, go through word of mouth, getting my work out there, showing what I can do. One of the things, going back to that price structure, is sometimes if I knew that client's going to have a very wide reach, I would give a pretty low price to get in with that client and make sure I'm doing work with them, and then be like, hey, tell your friends. So that's where a lot of my experience comes from. Now, I will say I've worked with students who've used some of those services. One of the students that I used to have did a lot of work on 3D marketplaces. He built 3D objects and would sell them on different 3D marketplaces, and he actually ended up working for Bethesda software. So he had some really good luck with that. I've known some people who've done that. Personally, it's not my experience, but if it's something you want to try out, what I always tell people, do your research, find out who's successful on it, who's not. I've had some friends who've purchased some design work from places like Fiverr, and I thought it was hilarious because my friend's like, hey, check out my new website. It's really cool. And I'm like, that's a generic free outline of a website that they used, and all they did was change the color. And how much did they charge you? And he's like, I don't want to tell you. So, do your research.
What is one key thought you would like to leave our audience with? What is one key core thought or action that you suggest that people need to really focus on to help them use AI in personal branding?
Never stop learning. Always keep up with trends. Look at what people are doing. Look at different tools. What you know today is not going to be relevant tomorrow. And this is going to be only amplified in the years to come. It's always a situation where I've worked with a ton of designers, and sometimes I see them using skills that are 10 years old, and it slows them down and it holds them back. And if they would take that time, like I said, schedule that time each week, keep up your skills, research what's new, stay on top of it, and make sure that what you're doing is relevant to the field, because it is so easy to get left behind if you're not keeping up.
Willie, where can we find you online? Where can a client find you? We know that we can find you as an Adobe specialist at the University of Texas at San Antonio through Google, but where can a client find you if they want to work with you?
Sure. So I always say reach out to me on LinkedIn, look up Willie Schaefer, Schaefer, and find that Willie that has a weird looking colored profile, because I like to make art of myself, self-portraits and all. But also I do a lot of content on the Academic Innovation YouTube channel. That's not really me, but check that content out if you're wanting to learn more about Adobe. Those are the two primary places to keep up with my shenanigans. Also on Twitter/X, it's at WeBreatheAdobe. So that's a great place to see what I've been up to.
Excellent. And another great example of how you're managing both the employer with academic innovation at UTSA and advertising yourself to employers at the same time that you are working and trying to recruit clients through these other platforms and these other websites. So if a client wanted to find you, they would go to your website. Can you spell that again for us?
Willie Schaefer, Schaefer, and you just put that in the search in LinkedIn. Feel free to friend me. I'll be happy to be your friend, or follow me, and I'm happy to chat.
Excellent. Willie, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise around Adobe and AI and personal branding. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. And with that, if anyone who's watching this wants to reach out, feel free. Doesn't matter if you're a client. If you're someone who just wants to talk about personal branding, branding design, giant robots, hit me up. I'm happy to talk all day long.
Giant robots, that's our hook. If you want to talk about giant robots and not just personal branding or graphic design, check out Willie, right?
Indeed.